So for me today, I'm going to talk about ethical entrepreneurship and affordable housing and building what's good for community and for business. I do want to share that story that Lorne brought and how we met. Lorne's a longtime friend and business partner of my business partner, Praveen Varshney, out of Vancouver. And on the day Lorne and I had got a chance to connect, I shared that I had done a program way back out of high school at Harvard called the Career Discovery Program. And if I hadn't raised that, I wouldn't have known that Lorne had actually taken that Career Discovery Program. And, I should just share, and I know Lorne, I'm not sure how much he shared with you guys, but that definitely had a great impact on my career and the trajectory that I took. But it was really cool to hear. And I actually, funny enough, I had never met anybody else in Canada other than, one of my best friends I grew up with who took the program with me. And Lorne shared with me that there was a couple others. And so, it was really cool to hear that. Lorne, did you have anything to say about that fun story?
No. Just it was an interesting sort of what I call connecting the dots, is you never know who you're going to talk to, and where you share something that you did together or some interest in your life. So Absolutely. It's part of why it's so much fun to be in the business that we're in, because we get to talk to people and meet really interesting, what Richard called last week, ideas-based entrepreneurs.
Excellent. Very cool.
Oh, okay, let's, by the way, if everybody can show their faces, it would really help.
Okay, so let's jump right in. So this is a question that I've asked myself actually from the very beginning. Can we build 100% affordable housing that's profitable? It's sort of the theme of tonight. Stephen talks about opportunity, and right now affordable housing, as some of us have seen in recent public elections, about how important the topic is. The pandemic has, without a doubt, exacerbated the problem with housing, rental housing, whether it be single family, multifamily, etc. And we all have faced the pressures of renting in various parts of our lives, and particularly today, it's a huge issue. So that's a question that we've asked ourselves, and that's sort of our theme that we're trying to cover today in the topic. So why is affordable housing so important? We look at it as being three governing aspects. Creating communities. Community is super important to various aspects of our lives. Social and economic stability, that's obviously really critical. The social balance and looking for economic stability in housing makes it for an successful affordable project. Physical and mental well-being of the tenants that occupy the buildings. I think the pandemic has really shown challenges people face, especially on the mental wellness side, and how important it is, how important housing is to that aspect of our lives. It's super critical. So that's what we believe affordable housing is so important. So just to go over what 3H Properties is trying to do from a high level, just so you guys understand, our mission is to increase the number of affordable housing units per development and help house 300,000 people currently on wait lists. That's a number from StatsCan. In some cases, in some communities, it's really unfortunate that some families wait up to 16 years to get a home. It's not uncommon to hear about 5, 7, 8-year waiting lists in various communities. Our vision is to change the affordable housing industry for the better by inspiring business, community to develop 100% affordable housing and more housing in general. Our approach is 100% affordable. There's many different approaches. You can cut up the pie several ways. And affordable housing as a problem is such a significant problem that any approach to developing housing is we believe a good approach. But our approach is developing 100% affordable. And so just to define that a little bit, 100% affordable to us means that it's a project that's unlike what you might see that's typically developed today, where you have a developer come in, develop 10, maybe 5, 10, or 20% of their projects as affordable, and the remaining to be market rental projects. Ours is 100% of those units to be 100% affordable. And our interest is to develop these properties in secondary communities across Canada in perpetuity. I'll talk a little bit about the in perpetuity aspect later in the presentation, but really critical. And our strategy is to partner with nonprofits to access grants and incentives to provide investors returns commensurate with the industry. And the reason why that's so important is that right now, affordable housing is only mostly handled and developed by nonprofits, cooperatives, housing authorities, and the like. And the business community hasn't been involved as I believe it should be. And I think, and I have a belief that if you get business, you get nonprofits, and you get government to work together, I think we can tackle this problem in a significant way. It just has to, happen, and people have to take steps forward, and that's what we're trying to do. So my journey so far, as I said, my name's Alfredo. Hermano. I co-founded 3H Properties with my business partner Praveen Varshney out of Vancouver. Praveen comes from a family of venture capitalists. They have a family office where they have a long time now invested in impact and social investments, and real estate is being another aspect of their family office. And so he and I have started 3H Properties. I also have a couple other companies that I founded, NGC Constructors, construction company, Fresh Strategies. It's an owner's rep company focusing on cinema and entertainment work, which is another big division that we have, and a few other businesses. So play a little video for you guys of talks a little bit about our business.
Do you have some memories? I know you were young when you moved.
I was born in the Philippines, but I do remember we lived in basically a bamboo hut that was on stilts.
So I was born in a small town in India, and then I was 5 years old when I moved to Canada.
Prior to moving to Canada, the Marcos regime was making the life in the Philippines quite difficult for everybody.
And I remember a few stories. I didn't speak any English. There was this little girl that lived next door. A cat would go by, and she would go cat, and then I would go Billy. So she was actually learning Hindi while I was learning English.
When your family moved here, did your parents have like a profession that they were able to do in Canada, or how was that?
A lot of immigrants, very humble beginnings, and so he was working as a busboy in the UBC cafeteria to make money. What ended up happening too was somebody here in Vancouver introduced him to the CPA program, or the CA program, and said, yeah, if you need money, you actually get paid while you're studying.
There was this feeling, and it came from my father, who was quite an outspoken person. He always felt that opportunities were so challenging for an immigrant to purchase a home, to get a job. I remember my mother saying that she was quite depressed having moved from the Philippines away from her family.
For our two kids especially, one of the things we've always wanted to do is introduce them to these different societies where it's very different than North America. They come back with a greater appreciation for what they have. My belief is if you're not learning and growing, you're flatlining, which is the next step to dying.
So my grandfather, he's a surgeon. He had impacted a lot of people. In fact, during his years, there was war in the Philippines. He helped a lot of people who couldn't even pay for his services. But on the day of his funeral, thousands of people had come out whose parents or grandparents' lives were saved by my grandfather. He had a great impact on his community and his people and his family. And so that's always driven me to feel the same, to have an impact, to give back, to somehow leave a legacy such as his.
Because of your perspective that you gained through your family's experience immigrating to Canada, how do you feel that has sort of influenced and shaped who you are and what you throw your energy into?
So we actually started a handful of different businesses. One of them actually was a casino company. Just through age and experience, learning that just because something's legal doesn't mean it's good or right. We've been fortunate enough to be involved with a number of companies, and the very first one was called Hermano, and we actually helped build it into Canada's largest solar company. We're doing something good for the planet and our kids' futures, and we're making a lot of money for investors and ourselves. Like, this is a no-brainer. We should be doing more of this kind of stuff as opposed to gaming.
Right now, there's 283,000 households who are looking for housing, and in some cases, in some communities, waiting up to 16 years.
About 15 years ago, I turned to my father, my younger brother, and said, we have to get more serious about real estate. Unfortunately, there's a reputation that some owners can have of being slumlords. This one building that we bought, it was by a financial firm in New York, and they never even visited the property once, and they just ran it into the ground. When we took it over, the very first thing we did was we rebuilt the children's playground. We actually have a scholarship program for kids in the building. We'll give them free backpack and school supplies. A charity that I just joined the board of called Foundations for Social Change. They did this experiment where they took 50 people that were homeless and gave them $7,500 cash. And so a lot of people thought they were crazy. They're like, oh my God, that money's gonna go to drugs. And the results were phenomenal. When you give someone $7,500, their need for shelter is gone. They can buy some clothes to get a proper job interview done. Most of these people now are, as I like to say, back in the game of life.
I feel like you're making an impact, like a huge impact, and to a lot of people too. That's amazing.
Our nonprofit partner is going to be key in our relationship. They'll be our tenant. We'll provide them a turnkey building. We'll be the developer and the landlord. They're the ones that are skilled and have the experience in helping the various levels of tenancy that need housing. And they also have the experience and the support and the administration in place for the various programs that are needed to help support their tenants. We want to build a niche in the hotel suite conversion. With the pandemic, hotels are not operating with much occupancy, and so their valuations are down. So that also plays to our strategy. With the hotel conversion, it already has its amenities in place, so we don't have to spend a significant amount on the conversion. But what we do want to do still is we still want to make it aesthetic. We still want to add curb appeal, so we will do some major changes to the exterior to make it a little bit more appealing. And while doing all that, what will be really cool is if we can actually set a trend, set a example to the rest of the private for-profit industry and the business community that developing affordable housing is not only good for the people in the community, it's also good for business.
Help us build a better future together and visit us at 3hproperties.com.
Alone, you can go fast, but together, we can go far.
Excellent. So I should share a little bit. I went into my story quite a bit, but the tie back for myself and why affordable housing is also important, along with just the impact, is that me and my sisters and family as immigrants when we moved from the Philippines, we actually lived in affordable housing. So it was a great platform for us to use or to have, where we could live in a great community, go to good schools, and it helped impact our future. And so we really think that affordable housing is something that is really important to our social community and to helping those that can't help themselves. So today we're gonna go through. We have 6 sections. We're gonna talk about, number 1, the current state and challenges in affordable housing. Number 2, what does ethical entrepreneurship look like in affordable housing? We'll take a 10-minute break after that. Section 3, navigating funding and investment. Number 4, how 3H Properties creates a successful project. That's the nuances and details and technical aspect of executing on development projects. Take a 10-minute break there. Section 5, how architects can affect change in affordable housing, and a Q&A session. And at the end of every section, we have a question or two. We can spend a few minutes on that, and would love to hear, hear you guys' thoughts and comments. So let's dive right in. So section 1, current state and challenges in affordable housing. The way we live is changing, but the way we build our homes need to change with it. So what is affordable housing? In Canada, rental housing is considered affordable if it costs less than 30% of the median households before tax income. As well, there's another metric that's used, and this is used by CMHC. The first is the official one, but secondly, affordable housing can also refer to a percentage below average monthly rent. And so you might have seen articles about affordable housing numbers in the past, and a project that, or a rental of a unit that is has a 10% discount on the average market rent is still considered affordable. Is that practical, and does that actually have an impact? You know, that's you know, a question, but it's still per CMHC considered to be affordable rent. 37.2% of Canadian households are renters per Canadian census in 2016. So that's pretty substantial. So how much are we actually paying? So here's information about percentages of proportion of households spending over 30% of income on rent and utilities. So seniors, it's about 54%, baby boomers about 42%, millennials 36%, Gen Z 49%. And this is a much worse situation when, you know, proportion of households are spending over 50% of income on rent and utilities, which really makes life quite challenging. And you can see the numbers there, which are still quite substantial. And it's really sad that that's something that many people experience. So increasing demand for homes. Canadian Real Estate Association reported home sales in February 2021 were up 39.2% from a year ago, and the average price had hit $678,000, up from 25% from a year earlier. Pandemic really had a really interesting impact on, not interesting, but a really dramatic impact on housing. What we thought might actually have prices depress, had prices significantly increase, and hence why the numbers are there. Construction is increasing, but not enough to meet demand. So since 2016, total completed housing units per quarter have increased 42.3%. Here's a question, no one needs to answer, but do you think that the solution most touted today of increasing supply of housing is a good one? I always, you know, that's something that if you read many articles that are being published today, you know, many people, whether they be politician or they be, you know, developer, you hear that, yeah, the solution is we need to increase housing. We need to increase the number of units. But a gentleman out of New York, Jonathan Rose, he's a developer out of New York who's been developing affordable housing for 30 years. He made a really great argument. I read an article the other day about that philosophy about increasing supply. And what he said was, you know, if you increase supply substantially, but yet still only are able to decrease the rental prices by, you know, 10 or 15%, is that going to have an impact? Well, it might help some people, but the vast majority who are, you know, considered to be the deep affordable or vulnerable or social, you know, tenants, they can't afford a 10% discount on average market rent. They can't even afford $500-600 a month on rent. So, you know, that's not the entire solution. I think it's a mix of solutions, as I was talking about with Stephen and Lorne earlier. But you know, that's it was just an interesting comment and a great rebuttal for that you know, that argument. So here's just an indication of the gap between home prices and income. What you see is, it's no surprise that Toronto and Vancouver are on the, you know, have the largest gap, you know, being, you know, primary and urban environments, and it goes up to, the likes of Hamilton and on. But those are pretty substantial numbers. So it's been close to 2 years with this pandemic now, and there's been some pretty significant effect. The income of average Canadians have been affected. Many people had gone on CEWS, which is the income subsidy provided by businesses. A lot of people went on CERB, which was also an income subsidy. But other impacts, other than the impact on affordable and affordable housing and the housing prices, is that the construction costs also increased substantially. And the reason why is that there was labor and material shortages. So a lot of people in Canada and the US, because work stopped and the government had to shut down construction sites, a lot of people either shifted to another career, or they decided to take a break. And in fact, I know a lot of folks who are already close to retirement, which is with construction having an average age that's closer to retirement, many people decided to leave the industry. And so the ramp up and recovery is going to be quite interesting, because that's going to be a pretty significant impact. But definitely during the pandemic, labor and material shortages had occurred due to that. Supply chain disruption. A lot of the materials that we use for construction projects come from other areas like the US and other parts of the world. And because borders were closed, because various impacts by the pandemic, those supply changes were significantly affected. For example, to get a fridge today, previously pre-pandemic, it'd take in some cases you get it, it might be on the showroom floor, or you might get it in 2 to 3 weeks. Today's time, I think it's 8 to 12 weeks, if not longer in some cases to get. That's just an example, but it's definitely an indication that the supply chain was significantly affected. Site and safety regulations, of course, those are quite obvious. Projects took longer, cost more to build. Effective and long-lasting recovery is still a moving target. That's something that we're experiencing and seeing today. So what housing is most needed? I think a lot of you may have heard of this term, missing middle, which is a multifamily housing, is a range of house scale buildings with multiple units, compatible in scale and form with detached single family homes and located in walkable neighborhoods. I've said this a couple times, but there's a significant, close to 300,000 people on a wait list. So yeah, so pretty significant, and something we really need to address. So there's a lot of great initiatives that are taking place on the affordable housing side, and I think, truth be told, that I believe that there's going to be a significant, there's going to be a lot more that'll arise in the next couple of years. When you heard from the elections, some of the numbers for the various parties and the number of units that they wanted to build, I think the Conservatives were talking about developing a million homes in 3 years, and you have the NDP wanting to develop, I think, something like 500,000, and then the Liberals wanting to do 300,000. And those are pretty substantial numbers, which means that today these are the initiatives that are currently in place. But what I foresee is that there'll be a lot more initiatives and a lot more funding coming to affordable housing, which is exciting. So, but some of the initiatives that we utilize in our model, but as well as that others use to develop affordable housing, because I'll have to say this, and this is a real strong statement, but affordable housing cannot be developed without government support. That's a reality, and so these types of initiatives are really critical. Rental subsidies, these are for those that those that are on disability or on pensions. only collect a few, 1,000 to, a little bit more than that per month, could only pay between $500-600 a month in rent. So in order for the actual cost of the building to be covered, the government steps in and provides rental subsidies for these particular tenants. And that's similar rent geared to income. It's a similar to rental subsidies, but it's has a specific subsidy based on the income of the individual. Co-living is a new and interesting concept that's taking place with a lot of developers are interested in and keen on developing that model. Right now, it's been successful in very expensive cities like San Francisco, Vancouver, New York, and the like. I think there's an opportunity, in my opinion, on the co-living side for affordable. I've had interesting discussions with folks about that opportunity because no one's doing it today. But that'll be based on a rental subsidy model, along with the co-living model. I think there's opportunity, which is exciting. Rapid housing, that was a program that CMHC implemented about a year ago, and they've done a couple rounds. But basically, CMHC allocated a couple $2 billion to housing the homeless. So they wanted to get some units built out extremely quickly, hence the rapid housing title, and they allocated a certain amount of money per city based on their total contribution. And it's interesting. Hamilton, speaking of Hamilton, they were able to develop, I think, something like 100 units because this rapid housing program would cover the total cost of the development. There's other federal programs. CMHC has some significant programs. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. It's a governing body that provides insurance for housing in Canada, and they have a lot of programs for affordable housing. They don't only do the insurance, but they provide direct lending for the development of affordable housing. And then the other big one is, city community amenity contributions. Those are things like development cost charges that are charged on projects within the municipality, whether they're being exempt or they're being granted as costs to the developer, or allowing further density on a project, or there's many different community amenity contributions, parks, and what have you. I'm sure you guys have seen those before. So this was a question that I asked myself as well, is why is affordable housing, this is at the beginning of our journey, why is affordable housing not more common? Although nonprofits, housing cooperatives, and housing authorities have been involved in developing affordable housing for a long time, and doing great work, the needle hasn't moved that substantially. In the last 30 years, CMHC developed 70,000 homes, affordable homes, and it sounds significant, but when you see, relatively speaking, 300,000 people today are waiting for homes. That's the number kind of shrinks, and the impact shrinks. Just as another example, the city of Hamilton, pre-pandemic, had developed only 350 new affordable housing units, and they have a waiting list of around 7,000 to 8,000 people. Let's say 7,000 to 8,000 families. So it's making a dent, but not a significant one. And so that's hence why we're trying to really motivate the business community to get involved in affordable housing. So our points here: requires subsidization and resulting government and public review, applications and required housing authorities and cooperatives for funding take time and planning. Nonprofit organizations tend to move a bit slower. On the surface, low price units appear less profitable to investors, and land is scarce and construction costs are high. Private developers are focusing on profits. So, and the cities like the Torontos and the Vancouvers, the cost of land alone is around 25% of the total cost of a development, which is substantial. And so, trying to make those projects work are quite challenging. Case study of the post-war building boom. Affordable mortgages for returning veterans was something that CMHC got involved in. CMHC mortgage loan insurance model, again, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation mortgage loan insurance model in 1954 made single-family homes more attainable. A lot of people coming home from war had there was a significant increase in population and immigration and what have you, and so homes were in significant demand, which increased demand for new suburban neighborhoods. Land prices contributed to 95% of the historical house price growth in Canada going back to 1921. And the boom of affordable housing built in the 1960s and 70s require replacement or refurbishment. So basically today, all that housing stock that was built in the 60s and 70s that we see today, when you read an article about people complaining and having living in really distressed situations because their elevators aren't working, windows are broken, there's buildings aren't well kept. It's because most of those buildings are seeing the end of their lives, essentially. And most of the materials and most of the equipment has already been stretched to the limit in terms of its function and its use. And so, that's another significant problem that we're facing. And so all this affordable housing stock needs to be replaced today or refurbished. So we come to the end of this section, and so we have a few minutes. I'd love to share share these questions with you guys and hear comments or thoughts. So question 1, what changes or effects have you experienced in your lifetime? And question 2, how will the cost of living affect where you choose to live and work? So I'd love to open up question 1 to the group and hear if anybody has any comments.
I would say about 20% or 30% of the class are coming from other countries. So some permanently in Canada, some not. And so there is a thought about what that means for housing and where people would eventually settle.
Yeah, very interesting.
Well, Stephen, I can't really talk on coming from a different country because I was born and raised in Toronto. But just because of the fact that I was born and raised in Toronto, I was able to stay with my parents for actually all of my undergrad. And I was able to save up and work and have these multiple jobs and actually afford housing downtown Toronto, to actually purchase a property as opposed to renting. Right. But I think I'm part of that very, very small number who was able to do that in at this age anyway, in that age group. But I would think people coming from other countries, they need to endure a lot of these extra expenses that couldn't put them ahead in life, which is getting on the topic of immigration. My parents, yourself, experienced all of that from coming to Canada. So I guess being the first generation Canadian, I get to finally experience why they moved over here for. It's for this exact reason. But I think the only reason why I was able to purchase a property was the only reason is because of COVID. Because the prices actually went down. I was likely able to keep my job, and so I was able to level off like that. So I have to say,
and there was a supply of relatively affordable units.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain areas of the city where that does exist.
Mhm. Yeah, they definitely they exist. For sure they exist. It's just a matter of like actually jumping on the opportunity. Because like when I was looking at the housing market, it's like you find something for a good price, just good overall, it's gone within a couple of days. So it's like a matter of just spending the time to look at that every day and just sometimes even just like leave work early. Like, listen, I got to go check out this place.
Right. Mhm.
So I think it's like a matter of just like taking up opportunity.
You must have caught that sweet spot, Anthony, because there was that time, you know, the urban Toronto area, you know, downtown Vancouver, prices depressed. You're absolutely right, and then there was that impact on cities like Hamilton, anything outside of Toronto started seeing a migration out of there, and those prices started increasing. You know, Hamilton alone went up two times it was 2 years ago. But you're right, like, I mean, great timing, and you know, you talk about how you were able to do that, and that's probably a common story amongst many, right? You know, having to live with their folks to save and to, but you talk about, you know, some of the other students who don't have that opportunity, so they have to incur these costs, and you know, so yeah, it's an interesting perspective. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. Does anybody have anything else to add? Okay, well, we're just running a few minutes slow, so let's jump right ahead to the next section. So section 2, what does ethical entrepreneurship look like in affordable housing? Creating and establishing innovative solutions in an aggressive and fluctuating market. So where to build? Zoning, increase in carrying costs. Zoning is a really key aspect in terms of deciding on where to build. There's many reasons. Zoning is an aspect that cities use to govern the development of not only housing, but commercial, office, industrial warehouse, infrastructure, what have you, and is really their key tool in one, helping the affordable housing problem, or in some cases impacting it severely. But zoning increasing affects your increased carrying costs, because you often have to go through a community review process if you're looking to rezone your property, which means, you know, taking it from one use to another, or in fact making significant changes also triggers a rezoning. And so as a developer and investor, you know, having a longer period that's unknown is quite risky, and it could in fact cause the cancellation of your project. Can cost in the millions with significant projects. Fundamental changes need to be made in almost all cities in order for affordable housing to develop. And in fact, cities are acknowledging this. You know, for the likes of cities like Hamilton, they're developing a new LRT system over the next couple of years, the light rail transit, and the city is going to be implementing at the hubs that developments be affordable housing developments, which is a great place, because you know you're basically at a transit on a transit corridor, and you're close to accessing the rest of the city and various amenities. So I think that's a great move. Location, logistics. Will materials be able to get there in a timely and cost-effective way? So this is more related to the construction of the projects. In some cases, in some communities, if you're developing a project in a smaller community, or they face winter conditions, the planning and logistics are really critical to the construction of those projects. Social integration, close to services, healthcare, education, and jobs. Sustainable integration, access to materials, equipment, solar panels, heat pumps, and supporting infrastructure. In some projects, solar panel systems and solar program doesn't work. It all depends on where the sun is relative to the location of the building, and is your building have a large roof that you can actually put solar panels on. There's other technologies that are out there that are really interesting and breaking ground with solar windows, solar cladding. There's also heat pumps and other types of geotechnical. There's lots of really cool, innovative technology that's coming out today that's really having an impact on sustainability. So addressing people's needs, not just profit margins. Avoid primary markets, rent evictions, flipping, bully bidding, gentrification. So our model is one where we focus on secondary markets. In the primary markets, such as the Torontos and Vancouvers, you've probably heard some of these terms, and if not, I'll help explain them. But rent evictions, that's when developers come in, they buy up a building, and they offer the existing tenants, a way to move out, or they come up with other solutions, and then they do renovations, and then they increase the rent substantially. And then in fact, some of those tenants who are promised to have a space in those buildings can't actually afford to pay the rent in these new buildings. And so that's really unfortunate. An unfortunate occurrence that's taking place today. Flipping, that's buying and flipping your properties immediately. Yes, investors do well, but the problem then you face is that real estate prices continue to increase. Bully bidding, if you never heard that term, that's basically when a bid takes place prior to it going out publicly. So that's been happening, and it's really unfortunate. And so you wonder why the house gets put up for sale and then it's sold immediately. It's because somebody came in with essentially an offer the owner couldn't refuse, or they were connected to the agents, and somehow bids took place without it going to the public, which is what that does as well, is it increases prices. And it's a frustrating thing when you're looking for homes, and these techniques take place. Gentrification, we hear about that all the time. It's really sad that that's taking place. If the preservation of affordable housing can be done in cities, you were able to keep the uniqueness. You're able to keep the folks that provide the services to the industries that make the community hum. Artists are able to live in these various communities, and so you just don't have a bunch of wealthy people moving into a community and changing the dynamic of it. It's unfortunate, and you see that happen quite a bit. Create and invest in secondary and tertiary markets. Secondary markets being the likes of the Hamiltons, tertiary markets being the likes of the Windsors. And so you develop where prices are low. That's our model. It works for affordable housing. You're able to develop when the price of land is low, and relatively speaking, construction costs and supply costs are lower in some of these communities. You create communities outside the city center. And city center being, the Torontos and the Vancouvers. So you're seeing interesting developments take place in smaller communities. Revitalized areas often become hubs of arts. And we're seeing that actually, in fact, in Hamilton. There's a huge art community here. There's lots of interesting and exciting growth that's taking place. Hamilton traditionally has had that reputation of a steel city, the hammer, as some might say. But there's a lot of really interesting things that are taking place. The art crawl on James, and other really cool things that take place in the city that really adds to the uniqueness that's in the city. Revitalization versus gentrification. So historically, we see movement of creatives into experimental communities that become incubators. We're actually talking about these cities before with Stephen and Lorne about Detroit. Detroit, when the car industry took it, tanked, Detroit really became a ghost town. And then now there's become some substantial investment in Detroit. Some significant, interesting communities that are slowly emerging. A few investors had taken a chance and made some big significant investments, and it's starting to see some revitalization, which is really cool. Winnipeg Warehouse District, and I've talked about Hamilton a little bit. Investing in well-planned affordable housing creates stability, increases income. Rents are always paid, spending power goes up. High price units have fluctuating rents and vacancy. Income disparity means affordable businesses are pushed out. I talked a little bit about that. There's a lot of we've seen it in the pandemic. You go into the likes of downtown Toronto, and many of these businesses that no longer can afford the rent or weren't able to survive through the pandemic. These are small restaurants, retail, service places, and you don't see them anymore. And are they going to really come back with how things are? Those are places where those employees are not highly paid, and so a lot of these employees in the past that were working at these places were not living in the city. They were living outside of the city and having to come in because they couldn't afford living in the city. And so that was really that's something that's really unfortunate, and we're trying to help resolve. For-profit housing does not address social inequality, results in displacement, dissolution of communities, and support systems. Here's a case study for for-profit corporate landlords. I'm not sure if you guys heard of this. This was announced about, I think about 5 or 6 months ago. A developer by the name of Core Development Group was looking to acquire about 4,000 rental properties, and these are single-family homes across Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, and Atlantic Canada over the next 4 years. And they were planning to spend about $1 billion in acquisitions that include both existing homes and the creation of new built to rent inventory. And their strategy really was to, that model, we talk about bringing a substantial supply to resolving the affordable housing problem. And then that was their solution. But when you look deeper, it actually is quite interesting. And I'll just share what Core Development Group stated. They believe that this adds gentle density to neighborhoods without disturbing the characteristics of the community. We are also substantially renovating these units to provide a safer living environment, including upgrades to heating, plumbing, insulation, and lighting to the highest energy standards. So then, we ask the question, can the independent home buyers successfully bid against $1 billion fund? So that's when you start diving deeper into this, into what they're doing, you find that, hey, by the way, these corporations that are able to borrow money at far less, a lower rate than the average home buyer is going and bidding on a home and able to offer, 50 and 20% higher for a home. And thus, if they do that 4,000 times over, that has a significant impact on the prices of homes. And so, you're taking away from individuals who could have afforded those homes, and now they're charging these homes at the highest rent possible because they are making these, these changes. And so, is that actually helping the average renter? Is that a solution that is a positive one? As I said earlier, that there's many different ways you can cut up the pie, but just perspective and thought that I wanted to share. Stephen, it looks like you were going to say something.
I was actually wondering about this because I was thinking, could there be efficient landlords, like a company that buys things, where there actually are greater efficiencies to some companies buying and becoming landlords than more cottage industry type landlords.
Yeah, I mean, it's been taking place as well in the US. You know, significant funds are coming in and buying up, you know, billions of dollars of homes. Yeah, I mean, they're gonna, without a doubt, you know, if the group who's buying, I think, has more of an altruistic approach where they come in and say, hey, you know, we're gonna improve these homes and we're gonna take a haircut on our profits and provide reasonable rents for them. If that's the message, I think that would be an incredible story. But I don't know if that's exactly what they're doing. But I think, you know, again, it's part of the pie, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
New tools in Proptech and real estate investment, property technology. Proptech is maybe a term you guys have heard, is the application of information technology and platform economics to real estate markets. It provides more data, potentially resulting in more profits, allows us to see hidden trends, automatically provides technology for facilitating sales and many other, you know, functions. You've heard of these companies: Service Management, the Airbnbs, Guesty, Open Door. Open Door being a US prop tech company that helps facilitate the purchases of homes. Fintechs analyzing the market on a large scale. Reonomy. But there's a double-edged sword with such things, and that was the example that we gave a few moments ago. You know, can it exacerbate the extremes? Do you think poor developments use analytical software to decide which properties to purchase? And absolutely, you know, that's another advantage that they'll have against the, you know, the typical home buyer. They can go in and find which properties and how much money they specifically need to spend to make it a profitable venture in the end. But again, it's, you know, it's in my opinion, a double-edged sword. How to build sustainable materials and methods. There's many different ways. I alluded to it earlier. There's technical advances going beyond digital, which is really exciting. Being in construction for close to 20 years now, you know, there's been a slow, you know, it's a more, you know, it's an older industry that has seen little innovation. But today there's a lot of really cool things taking place. You know, there's new sustainable building techniques, and they're changing how we utilize our budgets and spaces. Hundreds of millions in grants and incentives are focused on eco-friendly projects and have energy that have energy requirements, and so that's great. Is, you know, a lot of the big utility companies provide grants to improving your energy efficiency. Some examples of sustainable construction materials. Nexi is a group out of Vancouver that develops concrete, a new type of concrete panel system that actually emits 30% less carbon emissions. And so these guys have seen some significant growth and some significant success. SteelCon is a business out of Ontario, and what they do is they came up with a new technique for structural steel called Sin Beam, Sin structure, and basically what it is a way that they've designed structural steel to be 30% lighter than the typical steel that's being used in buildings. And so you can imagine the impact if you can make the building 30% lighter and use less steel. That has a significant impact on the environment. Solar, we hear about that. I mean, it's the most significant form of energy that we have access to today that I think has gigantic potential. Such things as, you know, solar cladding is slowly being used more. Solar panels, we've seen that significantly. Solar windows, so there's many applications. I even read about solar paint. So there's a lot of really cool applications that are taking place that I think have a lot of opportunity for growth. Other mechanisms that are used to help with reducing energy consumption are heat pumps and heat recovery systems. Heat pumps are units that are used in lieu of air conditioning systems. And so there's most air conditioning systems run on gas. And so if you can reduce the use of gas and simply utilize electricity, there's some significant savings there, but also there's less energy used in the use of heat pumps because they pump fresh air from the exterior into the interior with either heating the air or cooling the air, which provides the same feeling of air conditioning. Other innovative construction solutions include modular housing, 3D printing. I think modular housing, in my opinion, has incredible potential for growth, particularly in affordable housing and other type of repetitive construction programs. And so, but there's some challenges, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So I want to talk a little bit more about modular housing because there's different types of modular housing and different types of manufacturing of housing and the like. And so modular housing is different than pre-manufactured buildings. A pre-manufactured building is a building that is similarly built in a controlled environment in a warehouse somewhere and then delivered to site. But it's typically a whole bunch of pieces that are labeled and pre-manufactured and brought to site in pieces and then assembled on site. Whereas modular housing is also built in a controlled environment in a warehouse, but it's built into various units that are already finished to the point where you have your fixtures in there, you've got your taps and sinks and toilets, all the way to the painted surfaces and electrical and lights installed. And these are just rectilinear boxes that are installed on site on top of your concrete foundation and installed in quick fashion. But some of the benefits are lower costs. Construction time is roughly half of traditional. And the reason why with modular is that when you build the foundation, while you're building the foundation, doing excavation on your building, you could actually manufacture the modular units off-site. And so when you get to the completion of your foundation or your podium, depending on what type of building you're building, then you can place your modular units on top as soon as that's complete, and thus seeing significant cost savings and time. Less labor is required, less maintenance, because you don't actually have to have all the laborers and skilled tradesmen on site doing all the finishing and all the rough work, etc. All you need to do is, in the end, you need to put the finishes on the outside of the building, put the roof on, and then any common areas like corridors and such have to be done. And that's really the significance of work that takes place on site once the building has been assembled. There's improved sustainability, substantial improvements. Modules can be built to meet energy efficiency standards. There's less waste and precise planning and purchasing of materials. I mean, that's a big problem that we face in the construction and construction industry, is that there's a significant amount of waste that contributes to the degradation of the environment. And so if we can figure out ways to reduce that waste, that has a significant impact. But there are challenges. There are significant challenges, and that's the reason why modular hasn't yet hasn't become mainstream yet. And so some of the challenges you face are that one size fits all units are not compatible in with all climates. And so this is one thing that the modular designer and the modular builder have to be aware of. If you're building in a hot climate or a cold climate, you can't use the same techniques. So that's really important. Repairs in remote locations present challenges. And so any work in remote locations present challenges. That's not only a modular housing issue, but it is still an issue. In some locations that are remote, typically you may be able to stop by a Home Depot and pick up a few screws, but that can't take place when your Home Depot is 10 or 12 hours away. So your planning and logistics are really important, but also repairs can become challenging. All stakeholders should be involved in the design process. That's a really important aspect in making a modular housing project be successful, from the designers to the operators to the trades, the key trades you'll be working with on site, to the manufacturers. Everybody is really critical when it comes to the designing of modular housing, and as well as including the authorities that you're working in, authorities having jurisdiction in which you're working. Another big challenge is regulation is still quite young. So units must meet municipal bylaws, which may differ depending on where the modular units are installed. And so here's one thing that is a real big challenge when it comes to modular, and one of the main reasons why it hasn't become mainstream is that the municipalities in which you build in, the inspectors and the planners and those working within those environments aren't familiar with modular housing. And there's the rules and the regulations that govern the building and the development and the design of buildings haven't kept up with how modular housing is built and designed. And so they have to spend more time trying to figure out that challenge. So here's a video of a project that was done in Vancouver by the City of Vancouver. It's a modular housing project at 220 Terminal Avenue. I'm not sure if some of you are familiar, but just wanted to share a video of the project itself.
And Social Development and Vancouver Mayor Gregor Robertson were provided a tour of the facility by Luke Harrison, CEO of the Vancouver Affordable Housing Agency.
This is the amenity room at Vancouver's first temporary modular housing project. I wanted to point out some of the interesting features of this building. First of all, we have impact-resistant drywall throughout this space, as well as most of the common areas. The space has a full food prep area, fridges, as well as generous areas for eating and entertaining. And then the space has a TV to share. Common areas in this facility include a front entry office. We have a key machine as well as electronic entry to all the units. We have a shared laundry facility in this building, as well as a common area washroom. So this is a standard unit at our modular project. It's about 250 square feet. And some of the features that we have in a standard unit are we have a key card entrance. We also have a occupancy sensor for all the units, which allows control of the heating and ventilation units when someone actually leaves the unit for energy efficiency reasons. Of course, all the units have their own individual washrooms and individual kitchens. One of the interesting things about these units is you can actually pick them up and reassemble them in different form on a future site. And that's one of the main features about having them all kind of be self-contained as far as the heating and occupancy sensors and such. So this is one of our accessible units in our modular project. There's actually 10% of our units are fully accessible. Some of the interesting features about our accessible units are obviously lowered light switches. All the cabinetry and millwork is designed for wheelchair access and easy mobility, as well as low mounted switches around the beds for people that have difficulties getting out of beds. Here's one of our fully accessible washrooms in the project.
Vancouver's Affordable Housing Agency is working toward developing 2,500 new homes to create more affordable homes on city lands by 2021. Approximately 1,000 homes are currently in the planning process.
can't speak to the design aesthetic of those particular units, but it was a temporary housing project. So, there's definitely some consideration there. But you can see that, for all intents and purposes, that a modular housing project can be built, for the function of the need for the use that it's being designed for. And I think that, there's definitely a lot more opportunity to make it a lot more interesting. That's for sure. Where do funds come from appealing to investors? Although the profit margins may be higher in primary markets, how do we convince investors to invest in affordable housing? We do that by aligning the concept of profits with social impact and offering sustainable returns with sustainable projects. And so today, it's really interesting, the investment industry. And what I'm seeing is a lot of organizations, from institutions to private investors. Impact and social responsibility is really important to them. I've seen it time and again where somebody said to me, if there's an investment that provides a lower profit but has a significant impact, and that they would invest in that. And so that's really great to hear, considering we have a lot of problems right now in the world today. But I think that's definitely a start from the business community's perspective. Social capital has increasing value. Exploitative practices face backlash. If you ever heard the term greenwashing, there's a lot of organizations that, although they say they're making they're taking a social impact approach, or they're trying to find ways to help the environment, but they actually aren't. They're just using marketing terms and words to do that, and it's really sad and unfortunate. But that happens in every case in every industry. ESG, environmental, social, and governance. That's a firm's approach to environmental and social factors and the scores provided. That's a really key thing that's taking place with large institutions, whether they be pension funds, banks, venture capital firms, private equity. ESG is a really key component, and affordable housing fits in both the environmental as well as the social aspect of ESG. B corporations. B corporations are certified corporations who meet environmental, social, and public transparency and accountability standards to balance profit and purpose. So B corporations are organizations that aren't actually a legal entity, like a limited corporation, a partnership, or sole proprietorship. It's a certification for a corporation that essentially is doing good. And there's only so few companies that have that certification today. But that's something that our team at 3H Property is looking forward to putting in place and going through that process to become a B corporation. But it takes time, and it's not an easy process, but it's definitely worthwhile. So that's something that's really interesting that's taking place today. So we're at the end of our section 2, and just want to ask a couple quick questions. We're running a few minutes late from what I see our schedule to be, and I'm going to take a few minutes, a 10-minute break after the set of questions. But here we go. Where do you see yourself living in Canada and in the city? Watching the video tour of 220 Terminal Avenue, what would you do differently? Would you live in these type of units? That's actually a question that my team is really important to my team when it comes to designing and developing affordable housing. It's a really important question that we're able to answer. Yes, that could we live in this building ourselves? It's a really important question. You can design a building really uniquely. You can make it, you can make it function the way the intended program has. But if you can't say you can live in it, how can you expect others to want to live in it? And hence why it's an important question that we ask ourselves. And I think it's also an important design question when it comes to the initial, concept of the buildings. How much do you think these units would cost at a market rate? The average rent for a studio in Vancouver is basically $1,800. That's pretty substantial. That's definitely not affordable. Would you be interested in designing modular housing? Why or why not? And if you had the choice to invest, would you choose a high impact investment with a lower return, or top profit investment with a lower return? And yeah. So does anybody have any comments or questions?
That's a good range of questions here. I had one question about the modular housing thing. Modular housing is not necessarily only in the affordable sector. So for example, Habitat in Montreal is modular housing. And it was built more as a design statement or a vision of a lifestyle than it was meant to address an affordable issue. So you can say, would you be interested in designing modular housing? There's a variety of markets in which that can occur.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's modular housing can be done so many different ways. I think because it's in its infancy. I think there's a lot of opportunity to really make it a unique approach to, there's a lot of opportunity for design to be done uniquely on these types of buildings. But I think for sure, it definitely, practically speaking, from the construction perspective, it definitely has an impact if you can do it successfully.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you can design modular housing in a number of ways. One is that it looks like modular housing. It's meant to take advantage of the fact that it appears modular, or it's meant to hide the fact that it's modular. So for example, I went to see something called Indiana Building Systems in the middle of the US, and they were designing housing for, what's that place in Alberta, Fort McMurray or Fort Murray, something like that?
Fort McMurray, yeah.
So they were designing things that were built in a factory they had, put on flatbed trucks, brought out to Alberta, and they had a hinge system for the roof so that the roof would just hinge up and you would get your typical slope roof. They were in the business of designing housing that didn't look like modular housing, but was. So it was more an issue of profitability for the company than it was anything else. It wasn't meant to offer a different model of housing. It offered something that looked exactly like a stick-built house.
Yeah. I'm definitely, preference to the the latter, for sure. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts or comments or questions from the group?
I was just going to say, Stephen, that Habitat's a good example because it's actually withstood the test of time, right?
It did, yeah, very much so.
Like I was there a couple of years ago and it's still a vibrant community. It is what it is, right? And I can remember like seeing pictures of them, stacking them at the time and how different it was then. And that was like 1967, right?
Which is to say that one of the things that designers do is Habitat was an exciting image when it was done. And part of getting people to accept new things is making something that's exciting that people can get behind.
I think that's probably my one comment about 220 Terminal is that it doesn't really feel like a long-term community. The sort of aesthetic is kind of bare and sterile, and it feels like it's just kind of there as interim housing, not as like long-term affordable housing. And it would be nice to see that there could be modular housing that doesn't feel like it was just kind of like stacked to be kind of an in-between for people to get into kind of traditional housing.
So that's a critique of appearance, and I would say here's one for you then to answer. What do you think of the St. Lawrence neighborhood in Toronto, which has been a pretty much a long-term affordable housing community? Do you think it has an aesthetic issue to it as well?
I don't. I think like that was Irving Grossman, wasn't it? I think that there was like some intention behind that to kind of fit into the surrounding community, even just using kind of the brick buildings and fitting in with the kind of grid of the streets and everything. So I think that's probably why that's stood the test of time.
Right. That was a lot of architects. So it was Jerry Markson, Irving Grossman, Matsui Bayer. A lot of architects of a certain period tried to do something there.
But it worked a lot better than some of the other projects like Alex Park or, Regent Park.
Right. Mm-hmm. Which says something about urban form, about the extent to which you're building things that people know how to use, that people socially know how to use.
Excellent. Great comments, everybody. Any more comments or thoughts?
I was wondering what you thought about historic centers. When you say, where do you see yourself living in Canada in a city? About cities with historic centers, or I'm trying to make a distinction between cities. Areas with historic value or newer communities in cities, because it brings up the question of the extent to which you pit heritage goals versus social goals.
And I think you can also bring up another issue of urban expansion as well. Because most of these newer communities that are being developed are in suburban environments, as opposed to, those that have historic appeal, which are, generally speaking, cities of, older heritage, etc. So I think there's a third, point to that, which is something interesting that, I keep talking about Hamilton. Hamilton's actually in November doing a vote to address the urban expansion of its city limits, and a lot of developers are promoting this. As that's the way we need to. It's that thinking again. That's the way we need to resolve the affordable the housing problem in general. Is that we need to add more. We need to add more units. But again, that has a significant, environmental impact, and there's a lot of property available in the downtown cores, and in the city in general. And so, I think there's an interesting topic to discuss there as well. As well.
Well, I was thinking on the historic side, you can take case studies like Griffintown or Atwater Market in Montreal. You can take portions of Liberty Village in Toronto, and you get these situations where there's a the there's a debate about how much would how much of a heritage site do you save versus how much housing do you put up. Well, I'll tell you one that's really strong right now. The Dominion Foundry site in Toronto is a big flashpoint now, and it's pitting those who want to preserve a heritage district and some heritage buildings versus those who say, well, we could build a ton of affordable housing here if you let us clear more of the site and we can more efficiently develop this site.
Well, personally speaking, I would love to live in. I have a lot more appreciation for a place that has a little more historic value and a unique environment to live in. You know, that's just personally speaking.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you want to take a break now?
Yeah.
I'll give your voice a rest for a few minutes, and then we come back in 10 minutes.
Yeah, we'll take 10 minutes. We'll make the second break a little shorter, just because we're just what I'm tracking for time. We're running about 25 minutes, a little longer, but yeah, we can come back. It's 7. I have 7:27, maybe at 7:37. So that's what everybody else has.
All right, great. Look
Okay.
forward. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Hello.
We're back.
We're back. So let's jump right in, only because I'm trying to keep us on time. Section 3, navigating types of funding and investment. As we consider the intersection of social impact and profitability, it's crucial to understand where the funds come from. So making the case for 100% affordable housing versus mixed use. I just want to share another story about Jonathan Rose, who's that developer I referenced earlier, that's been in the business for about 30 years. Jonathan, in that same article, had noted that 25% of all developments that are developed in New York are 25% of them have to be affordable. And so, you know, his belief, and I agree with him, it makes sense. And again, to that point about, you know, the pie can be cut up, you know, multiple ways in terms of the approach to affordable housing. And so his argument for the development of mixed use developments is that they have a positive impact. And the reason why is that, you know, these upscale buildings that are developed in these primary markets, they also house the affordable components, you know, the likes of nurses' aides or teachers' assistants or construction workers or, you know, people in the service industry. And so, you know, that helps contribute to the balance of those individuals living in those various communities. And that makes sense. And, you know, it's hard to argue that point that it doesn't. So affordable housing, 100% of affordable versus mixed use. Mixed use developments offer an appealing portfolio to investors, but often only provide 10 to 20% of units as affordable housing. When the need and benefits of affordable housing are so strong, much like our model, it's time to focus on 100% affordable housing. And again, that's just one perspective. While the profits may not be as high, there are multiple ways to secure funding. Where does funding for most developments come from? So for real estate, where you see most of the funding, you see them from accredited investors. Accredited investors are those individuals who make a certain level of income and have a certain level of net worth, and so those investors are able to invest in affordable housing projects as opposed to non-accredited investors, who are simply people that can't meet those requirements, and thus there's a lot more regulatory over people that aren't accredited investors. Developers and funds, federal, provincial, and municipal funds. I talked about on the municipal side, the amenity contributions being one way that cities provide funding. Institutions like banks, credit unions, pension funds are quite involved in investing in affordable housing, or investing in housing in general, as well as affordable. Real estate investment trusts, REITs, you may have heard those terms before. It's a model where the profits that are made within the REIT must be distributed to the unit holders, and thus the REIT itself doesn't pay profit. And it's a useful tool when it comes to developing affordable. And it's actually a tool that we're going to look at launching in the next couple of years as part of our 3H group of companies, because we believe we want to really take this affordable housing, the 100%, the development of 100% affordable housing to another level. And we wish to also launch a public REIT that focuses on 100% affordable. Family offices, private equity firms, family offices being the much like Praveen's family has built some wealth and resources over a certain period of time, and they reinvest their those resources into investments. Growing sources of funds for affordable housing include impact investors. We talked about investors that have the belief in ESG and the like. Private grants. There's a lot of private grants that are out there. We just have to look for them, that are interested in contributing to social impact investments. Forgivable loans. Those are things that whether it be municipal or CMHC federal, there's a forgivable loan portion which has a significant impact on the financial pro formas that make housing developments make sense. Subsidies, I referred to that earlier. Those are rental subsidies for the individual tenants. REITs, just talked about that. Proptech, there's a lot of interesting new models that are taking place in the development of housing. Such ones as Front Funder or Addy, which is out of Vancouver. Addy, might have heard of this company. They instead of charging fees to both the investors as well as the to the investors as well as the developers, they only charge a membership fee for investors, and it allows with a maximum investment of $1,500 per development. And so it's an interesting new and innovative model for investing in affordable housing. It allows people who are not accredited investors to invest in real estate. Foundations and university endowments. So 3H Properties, we have a unique funding model because we partner with nonprofits. We need and require certain incentives to make our models work. And because of these incentives, forgivable loans and grants, we're able to make about 20 to 25% of our total project costs as these loans and grants, and it makes our models work. We get 95, in some cases 100% loan to cost. That's a measurement that's used when it comes to seeking loans. In this particular case, we only need 5% of the total value of the loan as our equity needed to obtain the loan. So that's pretty substantial, because what that ends up doing is it keeps your costs low in order for you to be able to charge lower rents, making the projects affordable. 50-year amortization periods. Typically, if you buy a single family home, you get 25 to 30-year amortization. Extending it to 50 years, again, what that does is it also depresses the cost of your loan, and thus you're able to pass that on to your tenants and keeping the model affordable. That's a really key component. Low interest rates, of course, low vacancy rates. In affordable housing, because there's such a significant number of families waiting for homes with these significant reservation lists, the vacancy rates are quite low as opposed to comparable, for-profit rental properties. Quick period to stabilization. Stabilization means when a building gets occupied, when tenants move in, when you fully occupy the building, that you reach a stabilization. And so in affordable housing projects, it's quick to stabilization, again, for the reason that there's so many individuals waiting for homes that you could easily fill a building quite quickly, hence the quick term to stabilization. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to stabilize a building super quickly. I mean, you can't move 100 families into a building on a weekend. So you actually have to take it a bit of time to do that properly so that the building, gets occupied in an efficient and effective way. Development cost charge and property taxes are waived. That's substantial again, in terms of various development cost charges in various cities. They're quite significant, and they make or break projects. And it's for affordable housing projects to work. These costs are waived, and so that again helps depress the cost of the project itself, and again be able to pass on the lower affordable rent. But there's three key aspects to securing the funding in our particular model, which is unique. We have to have our nonprofits on title on the property. It's 100%. They also have to have ownership in our legal structure as well. Because we develop 100% affordable, we're also looking to keep it in perpetuity. I think I alluded to that earlier in the presentation. Perpetuity is really important to us because our nonprofit partners, what they don't want to see and happen is that if we agree to a 25 to 30 year term a lease with our nonprofit partner, what they don't want to see is at the end of that lease, if the building is sold to say a for-profit organization, that all these tenants are put out on the street who are paying below market rents. If they know that that's going to happen, that's not part of their vision, that's not part of their objectives, and thus that wouldn't be very appealing to them to be involved in a agreement such as that. And where ours is different is that we develop these projects 100% affordable in perpetuity, and the mechanism we use is a 99 year covenant, keeping it 100% affordable. For the model to work, cost must be low versus traditional model of high cost, high profit. As I said, all these points that have been noted here are points that help keep the overall cost of the development low, the capital cost of the development low, and thus we're able to pass on these lower costs and keep the rents affordable. Creating meaningful partnerships with nonprofits. 3H Properties works closely with CMHC. CMHC has allocated about $75 billion over the next 10 years in the development of affordable. So that's some substantial opportunities for all of us in the real estate and design and engineering industries, construction industries. That's going to be a substantial aspect of what the government will be focused on in terms of construction and development, and results in substantial opportunities. A lot of the architects who you may be seeking employment from will start, I'm pretty confident that a significant number of them will be looking at getting more involved in affordable housing. Access to funding and loan insurance. They vet potential purchases, develop ideas, utilize data and research. CMHC has a really unique organization in that they have an innovation teams. They have various divisions that are looking at ways to improve the affordable housing industry. But the requirements for their funding require some significant points on the checklist to be checked off, such as sustainability is really important to their developments. Accessibility, meaning it was referred to in that video with the modular building, the certain percentage of the units must meet certain accessibility standards, and below market rents. Another real key component in obtaining their funding. As I said, CMHC has an innovation fund. I think it's, for now, we've talked about the $200 million that they've allocated, but I think they've got $300 to $600 million actually allocated for unique and innovative design techniques and approaches to affordable housing. So lots of opportunity there. So we're at the end of this section. It was a shorter and quicker section, and it's sort of keeping us a little bit more on schedule. But I'll like to ask a couple of these quick questions and see if there's any thoughts or comments. What are the impacts of a budget on space? So how would you address mass producing of affordable housing because of the need and the demand that's taking place over the next couple of years? And if you were to think about a one-bed apartment, what are the features you can provide on a budget of either $150, $300 per square foot, or $800 per square foot? And just to give you guys a bit of perspective, you know, $150 per square foot would allow you to build a single-family home of a modest design. $300 per square feet would allow you to build, you know, a low to a mid-rise building of concrete, again, of medium quality or modest quality. And $800 per square foot, that's a high-end, you know, condo development, just to give you guys the perspectives. But just posing those questions out there and seeing if anybody has any comments.
I have one thing on that budget. Do you think that's the budget figures for, those are today's numbers, $150, $300, $800?
They're restricted to construction costs only.
Yeah.
In some cases, yeah. I mean, it's hard to say because numbers are moving all the time, right? But generally speaking, these are some of the numbers these are the numbers we've seen. With the recovery taking place in my belief, as borders open, as logistics ease, I think costs will come down from the highs that we were seeing. You know, we were hearing about wood going up 300%, you know, and all related materials going up substantially. But that was the adverse effect of the pandemic, as well as, you know, some of the things that were taking place in these secondary communities with people moving into these remote, you know, under the remote work environment. And so as that all tempers out, I think over the next couple of years, or the next year rather, things will stabilize a bit and prices will be a little bit more, you know, back to normal.
I'd like to say, Alfredo, this is a really interesting section because this is where you start to look under the hood of 3H and see how you work, how you think. It's a really interesting segment that you just did.
Yeah, we carry the $300 a square foot for our buildings because most of our buildings range around the 100 to 150 units and you know 6-7 stories tall. So that's, and typically of concrete construction. And so we're able to get, you know, prices around there. That doesn't include soft costs. That doesn't include, you know, other costs like land, etc. That's simply construction costs.
Could I say a general comment about this segment?
Sure.
What I noticed is how much you are aware of government programs and how much they're a key ingredient of funding models and things like that. Would you say that's true, or that impression of that section of your lecture?
Yeah, the government programs are absolutely necessary for us to offer the 100% affordable. If we were not to take on government subsidies and government grants and forgivable loans, we would have to start venturing into the mixed, you know, including, you know, for-profit and essentially doing what everybody else is doing. So we're trying to, you know, break the mold and trying to get as much affordable housing on the market as possible by, you know, utilizing these grants and loans. And that's
so what
right,
follows.
That's your secret sauce, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's your secret sauce.
Yeah.
Right. Is that by doing that, you're reducing your cost by 25%.
Correct. Yeah.
So you're always looking at the political landscape. You're seeing what's changing, what's coming up. that seems to be an important part, is to forecast what programs may be coming up, not just the ones that are existing at any one moment.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, we hear from CMHC, there's some funding that's coming out to address a lot of the unoccupied, you know, office and retail spaces. You know, how do we address that? Because there's been a big impact from the pandemic, and so they're allocating some funding there. You know, Scotiabank just allocated 10 billion over the last year, allocated 10 billion to affordable housing, and they haven't even structured their program yet. So we're in fact in talks with the head of that program about how to structure it, you know, so that it could have the greatest impact. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the necessity. You know, that's what's necessary for us to make our model work, and so we have to really be on top of those programs for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. Excellent. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, let's jump to section 4. So this is how 3H Properties creates a successful project. So this gets into the technical side of our business, and essentially, you know, a 7-step process to doing a real estate development project that's affordable. The process is from concept to construction to management, requires a solid vision and a great team. So I talked about this actually just a few moments ago. You know, our plans to launch a public REIT in the future and the purpose behind that. The secondary purpose that we also desire to create is much like the model that I talked about earlier, that Proptech new technology company that came out to, you know, and how to get others other than, you know, institutions and accredited investors involved in developing housing. Our goal is to sort of democratize the opportunity to invest in affordable housing by creating this in the future, a public REIT that focuses on 100% affordable. And so that'll allow, you know, individuals who aren't accredited to be able to buy units in the REIT, and perhaps even potentially our tenants. You know, we don't look at our tenants as living in the affordable environment forever. We look at that as being an opportunity for them to utilize the space and have it as a place for them to be able to improve their lives. You know, just like my family, we had lived in affordable housing, and then, you know, we looked at ways to try to improve our economic status so that we could, you know, have our kids, you know, my parents have their kids go to good schools and university, etc. And so if we can do that, and if we can achieve that while at the same time contributing to having a significant social impact and developing affordable housing, that's our goal there. We have something else that's really cool that we're looking and planning to develop in the next couple of years as well, as a 3H Impact Debt Fund. This is it's a fintech play where we intend to create essentially a secondary option to CMHC in terms of providing loans for construction, as well as providing loans to developers who need funds to get their developments off the ground. There's a lot of opportunity. I should share that there's a lot of land owned by smaller developers and nonprofits that are essentially significant, have significant equity, but these people don't have neither resources or skills on the affordable development side. And so what we want to do is provide them low-cost loans to be able to get their projects through the development permit process, or in Ontario, the site plan approval process, so that they can mitigate the risk of doing a development and be able to get to construction. And so we want to provide that opportunity in the next couple of years. We aim to raise about $1 billion and provide the similar incentives that CMHC provides. And we're in fact working with CMHC and Scotiabank on this today. So it's really, really exciting. So it's the ecosystem that we wish to develop in the next couple of years. So we'll talk more about the project lifecycle. There's 7 steps that we've created. It's pretty much similar to most other organizations, but ours is more focused on the affordable side. So you want to organize your team first. Secondly, you want to research and determine the market opportunity for the region of focus. Third, you want to create a 1-pager plan, timeline, and pro forma for the business. Fourth, you want to select a property, run a feasibility, undertake due diligence. Number 5, obtain your funding for the development. Number 6, close the land, undertake zoning, variances, site plan applications, and on some other regions, development permit applications, building permit, and then construction. And then you want to achieve stabilization, monitor, track, and measure your project. So organizing a team is really critical in making a successful project. You want to bring together your key internal staff that'll be involved in developing, involved in the development, including a good development manager and support staff. You want to reach out and collaborate with nonprofits early in the program. You want to reach out and collaborate with architects and consultants, legal, finance, and accounting at the get-go. This is all in concept stage. You want to create creativity and vision and shared vision of impact and improvement for society as an asset for all. We noticed that with the groups, with the partnerships that we've created, that impact and giving back to society is a consistent theme that we see amongst our partners, and it's a shared theme. And what you end up experiencing is a group that that actually puts a little bit. It's not just a paycheck anymore to the various stakeholders and proponents. They look at it as, how do we have an impact? So they take it, they take to heart the design, the impacts, the improvements, the challenges, and so it's really important to us, and it makes our jobs easier in the end. Number 2, what you want to do is research and determine the market opportunity. And so you want to determine your region of focus and why. We focus on areas between British Columbia and Ontario and everything in between. We haven't gone, further east for reasons because we've had a lot of experience between BC and Ontario, and just haven't sought any opportunities outside of that area. You want to look at growth. You want to look at potentially where are the areas that have depressed prices that allow your model to work. Stability, infrastructure development, any potential significant infrastructure projects taking place. You want to categorize your focus. Is it national? Is it provincial, municipal, or is it neighborhood? Obviously, if you're starting out, you want to start out a little smaller, and you want to focus on your particular area. Probably your neighborhood or your municipality. The one that you're familiar with will probably have the greatest impact and probably be the most, the logistically easiest approach at the beginning. You want to reach out to your local architects, planners, lawyers, nonprofits. I talked about that earlier. Your ideal locations will have appropriate zoning in place. That's in fact our strategy. Our strategy is one where we don't look to rezone our developments. So, and what that means is, we go in, we find a site that can handle, or that can occupy the number of units we need to make our model work, while at the same time, does it have the setbacks, the heights, and are those restrictions fit within our model? We also look at things like, heritage. Does heritage have an impact? We look at other zoning requirements, and we do that by having conversations with, again, the local planners and the local architects. And what's really important, especially getting involved, what I've seen and involved in this particular industry, keeping all your research for future reference is really critical, only because, you know, in applications, you're going to have to be arguing why you're using a certain market rates. You're going to have to argue why, you know, the location suits the, you know, the needs of the demand of the community for affordable, and it goes on so on and so forth. So it's really important to keep your research. Nothing's ever wasted. Number 3, you create a one-pager plan, timeline, pro forma for the business. I'm not a big fan of really big business plans. For me, when it comes to, you know, these type of projects, that a one-pager that outlines, you know, your what outlines in your description of your business, you know, your timeline. It covers your competitive advantages, your secret sauce. It talks about some of the challenges. It talks about your strategy and vision, your mission. And if you can kind of keep that on one page, and you pass it on to investors, you know, investors are pretty busy. They struggle to spend a lot of time reading through a substantial document, such as a business plan. So if they can see on a one-pager what it is your business is about, you know, it's a lot more advantageous, particularly today when things, you know, the climate is constantly changing every day, and you know, being on top of it is very difficult because of the various influences. Timeline. I'm always a big believer in being partly aggressive, but also more importantly realistic. If you can implement a timeline like that has you know, I think that your projects are going to be a little bit more successful. Online Proptech development. Just wanted to share, you know, since we're doing a fintech, some of the timeline key components of a timeline include your minimum viable product launch, and this is a bit of a step away from the real estate stuff, but that's just something I wanted to share there. In terms of developments, you know, the development process, acquisition, your due diligence period, etc., development permit, building permit, and construction timeline, those are really critical for the life cycle of a project. And for this business, you want to have a pro forma. You know, that's really what's most important to investors. You want to have a financial model that makes sense, and that financial model has been well researched. It's been a lot of backup is able to be provided for the numbers that you put in the model, because that's what's really important for investors to see if it's worth investing in, but also seeing, you know, what happens if the project doesn't go the way that you expect it to go. You know, what are your plans and how are you mitigating such things? And you can see that, you know, when you run a pro forma. Show examples for business, not just a single project, and you want to run them for about 5 to 10 year projections. Those are pretty important. Anything beyond that, it's really hard to predict, but that gives you, you know, a long enough timeline. Section 4, you select a property, run a feasibility, and undertake due diligence. When you select a property, things that you'll consider that are really important, of course, is the size of the land and the zoning, the price of the land. As I said earlier, in, you know, primary urban centers like the Torontos and Vancouver, the price of land is about 20 to 25% of the total cost. So that's quite challenging. Whereas in secondary markets, you know, such as the Hamiltons and the like, you know, we're seeing prices only being about, in some cases, 7.5% to maybe 12% of your total costs. So the building size, location, heritage is a really important aspect. A lot of cities have buildings that you would not think have a heritage designation to them. So it's really important when you're doing your due diligence that you look into those type of requirements, because if if a building has heritage designation, you're going to have to attend to the requirements of the heritage law bylaws. You want to run a feasibility. For us at 3H Properties, we've got a phase 1 and a phase 2 feasibility study. Basically, we run a model when we're looking at a project at its concept stage and take into account those points that I brought up. I mean, the land, the price, the building size, number of units, etc. Where it's located, is it on a transit corridor? Is it close to amenities? Is it close to areas of work? Is it close to pharmacies, schools, and the like? And how is that rated? And then we have a phase 2, which is more of a detailed pro forma for that specific project. Under the due diligence period, when we undertake this, once we've selected a property, some key aspects for a development project is you'll want to do an appraisal of the property. So whatever the owner is offering, is it actually in line with what a registered appraiser would come up with? You want to do survey of the land, so you want to make sure that there's no encumbrances. You want to make sure that that the property lines are where they're indicated to be. Obviously, that would impact the design of the building and your setbacks, etc. You want to evaluate and conduct a report on the environmental impact of that particular property. So you want to do a phase 1 environmental site assessment. If the site has more potential contamination, and the worst being laundry facilities, dry cleaners, because what I've been told by our engineer that the dry cleaning liquid, it travels and the below ground groundwater more easily than other types of contamination, and thus impacts a greater area, and thus it's a big concern by the ministry. And so those are important. You want to also undertake a detailed concept design, which you'll want to have a discussion with the city about and talk with your planner about. And that would be something you'd obviously undertake with your architectural team. You want to do some, massing, determining what the size of the building is. If your building is a multifamily building, where is your parking garage going to be located? Where is your refuse area going to be located? What amenity spaces are you going to have? How much parking are you required to have? So on and so forth. So lots of really key aspects functionally that will make that are required to meet the program requirements of the city. Objective is to see if the pro forma works and to determine how and if any obstacles can be overcome. So, once you've undertaken your due diligence, a lot of the numbers that you put in your pro forma at the start, you can actually start validating them. And if you start seeing that some of the numbers aren't making any more sense, it's actually a really good time to make a decision whether you want to proceed with the project or not, because there's significant capital and investment that takes place, and thus risk. So those things are really important. So once you've selected the property, what you want to do is you want to obtain your funding. So now you're either going to banks, you're going to all the various organizations I referred to earlier, and look for, in our particular case, when we're looking for funding for a particular project, oftentimes it's with other, as I said earlier, groups that have a desire to have an impact. In fact, quick story that, today I was introduced to a gentleman who's selling a piece of land in Hamilton on the east side. And in fact, this gentleman has been approached by many developers already to date, because with cash offers saying, hey, we'll just take this piece of land off of you, for this price, and willing to pay you, immediately. And so, because the owner feels like, hey, this is a property that I've owned for a long time. I'm an older fella, and I want to have, an impact is really important to him. Leaving a positive impact. He doesn't want to sell it to any developer that's out there that's just going to build a regular for-profit project. He's looking for a group that is interested in having a social impact, which is great and really exciting, because in fact he came to us and he's giving us the opportunity to make an offer on the property, and in the same vein, he's upset a lot of people because selling the property would be definitely an easier process than trying to achieve a higher goal. So we talked about all the resources. We've talked about this already: private accredited investors, government incentives, institutions, cities and provinces, grants, subsidies. We talked about that already. CMHC, being a direct lender for affordable housing, has 3 significant programs that they use. One is a co-investment program, which is essentially what we use with our nonprofit partners. But also there's opportunity for what they call the RCFI program, which is their rental construction financing program. And then their third program are their rental flex programs, which actually isn't money that they're using to directly lend out in that particular program. What they're doing there is they are providing insurance to banks and other lenders to provide funding for affordable. And in most of these cases, they all are low interest loans, and they're at longer amortization periods of 40 to 50 years. So what you want to do, in step 6, you want to close the land and undertake zoning variances, DP, VP, and construction. You want to be aware of your timelines. Proactive planning will save time and money. You're going to react quickly to problems, common challenges, city zoning and the public approval process, site environmental approval. We talked about this. Engineering and building permit approval. Those are challenges. Access to trades and suppliers. These challenges can be mitigated by an experienced team, local knowledge, a planner with knowledge of local zoning, and focus on building good relationships. And the last thing you want to do is, once you want to achieve stabilization, you want to track and measure your project. So stabilization, as I talked about earlier, is when the building is fully leased. You want to share resources to help your tenants, whether they be subsidies, social services, a good property management company, along with a nonprofit partner who will either operate or third party it to a property management company. You want to use software and technology where you can. We've partnered with TELUS Mobility in that they have TELUS launched an impact fund about a year ago called their TELUS Pollinator Fund. They're an investor in our developments. But what they also have is a division they call smart buildings, where they utilize technology to help better operate and manage buildings with controls over door locks for viewings. They have temperature control, remote temperature control, analysis and meters for energy and energy use, etc. So there's a lot of interesting technology that's out there that helps you run more efficiently. And then you want to track costs. Occupancy is vital to your investors. Detailed reporting on your operations and returns encourages future investment. So here's a project we're doing that's actually happening right now in Hamilton. It's at 405 Main Street West. In terms of selecting the property, we went through CMHC's rating system. They have a rating system for the viability of various projects. And this project, as I talked about, we're not going to be required to do any rezoning. And the reason why is we're only building to the zoning in place, which in fact allows us to de-risk our projects and be able to complete them quicker. And then we conducted a phase 1 and phase 2 feasibility, which rated high and high for us. So that made the projects quite, hence why we decided to proceed with the project. Funding, we have a limited partnership, general partnership structure. That's where the general partner is ourselves and 3H Properties on this particular project, and our limited partners are our investors. Profitability for our impact investors is really important, but not as important as the impact itself. Partnerships that we create for this project are CMHC, nonprofits, and other businesses, other stakeholders. Location is on Main Street West in West Hamilton. If you're familiar, any of you are familiar, it's close to Locke Street, which is a popular street in Hamilton. Next to us is going to be a 8-story development condo development, for profit, for sale. And then across the street, again, a similar condo that's for profit, for sale, and that's being developed by Brad Lamb and his group, he's a prominent developer in Toronto. And so, yeah, we're close to these developments, and ours is 100% affordable. These are ground floor plan, landscape plan. On the right, that's Main Street, which is a main thoroughfare in Hamilton. It only heads in one direction. It heads towards the east. And then on the back side of the building to the right, that's Jackson Street. So that's more of a residential neighborhood. So what we've done is we've made the main access to the parking garage from Jackson Street. We've also had located the refuse area on Jackson Street. And there's reasons for that, is that, off of Main Street, you can't have vehicles enter a site and then exit a site, to back up and exit the site back onto Main Street. And so due to that, we were restricted by where we could locate the, those particular aspects of our project. We have units on the ground floor, and we have amenity spaces on the Main Street side. We have an office, we have a common area for tenants, we have a gym on the ground floor, we have a laundry space, we have bicycle storage, we have about, I think, 25 or 26 parking spaces for a 100-unit building. And so that makes up some aspects of our design. That's a look from Main Street. The objective with this project was to show respect to the urban environment in that Hamilton's steel history with the brick. It's not fully rendered out, so you can't see all the details, but there's also wood and metallic aspects to the storefront. We have these planters and other areas on the building that are going to be opportunities for local artists to do paintings, bring in other groups, such as perhaps we haven't finalized who our nonprofit is. In fact, we're in talks with some Indigenous nonprofit groups as well that could come in and provide similar art pieces to some of the spaces that we've allocated. And we tried to bring a little pop of color. As you can see, our neighbor, which is an 8-story development, is pretty monochromatic. They've got grays and whites and blacks, and which is pretty common, and nondescript in a building that I think works. But what we're trying to do is trying to set a bit of a trend and trying to add a bit of color, a little bit of different types of materials, and as well as achieve sustainable and accessible standards. It's just an image from the rear from Jackson Street. We had to do a bit of a step back setback rather, on the third story, and up there we have a barbecue area, a common space, amenity space for the tenants. Our one bedroom deep affordable tenants are those that are subsidized, and so they have smaller units. They range between 350 to 400 square feet. We work with our nonprofit partners to determine what the ideal square footages are, and that comes with multiple recommendations and studies. On the market affordable beds, they are a little bit smaller, but the range is between 450 to 500 square feet. And then our two bedrooms range between 650 to 700 square feet. So slightly smaller, but we like to have an open floor concept, lighter colors to make the space feel a little bit open, as much daylight as possible in the suites, and just the open concept and nice finishes. Try to make it a place that we, the question that we ask ourselves, as I said earlier, is, can we live in this space? Can we live in this building? So we're at the end of this section, and there's a question that we posed is weighing your options. Given the life cycle discussed and factors to consider, do you feel like pursuing 100% affordable housing project is worthwhile? Why or why not?
Well, it seems like an interesting opportunity, and you've really given us a broad scope of the thoughts and parameters you have when you develop something. One question I had was, I was unsure if you are also a property operator, you manage your properties. Do you build them yourselves, or do you have a builder partner in it? If you go through all those possible roles, landlord, property manager, builder, etc., how many of those do you do, and how many of those do you find partners for?
Good question, Steve. And our model is one where we partner with nonprofits on a 25 to 30 year term head lease or a block lease, depending on the building. They're nonprofit managed entire building, or we could bring a few nonprofits together. And so we don't operate the buildings. They're the ones that have the experience and the knowledge to manage some of the deep affordable tenants, social tenants. They bring in the social programs, etc. So we try to stay away from that side of the business, and let the experts do that. We do turnkey construction. So our construction division undertakes the construction projects on a management basis, so on a construction management program. So that's the extent of our construction. Because we have suppliers and partners across the country, it's very useful for us to utilize that, and also make it easier for our nonprofit partners to just have less entities to work with when it comes to developing a project.
So you do construction management, and do you find that that's different from a lot of developers? Like, a lot of developers will use, say, Tucker High Rise or Bluescape for someone to build the building.
Yeah, one thing that because a lot of those developers are working with bigger organizations, and some of those bigger organizations are union organizations. We're not union, and so we're able to provide some of the non-union efficiencies, like in some cases lower prices and quicker timelines, and so that's an advantage for us. And that works in some communities, and then we have to sometimes take different approaches in other communities. We would consider outsourcing if the project didn't make sense for us to undertake. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. You're a landlord, you're a builder, and a developer.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions from the group?
I had one. Sorry if I'm dominant on this. When you say you do 100% perpetuity, that means you don't depreciate your buildings because it didn't show up as a funding, part of the funding. Is that right?
No, yeah, we don't. Our model is when we talk about 100% in perpetuity, we have a 99-year covenant in place for our properties. After that, we don't know what's going to take place, but that's in the event, the investors wish to sell the building. We want to whoever occupies it in the future, whoever owns it in the future must keep it 100% affordable so that the tenants don't get impacted. But in terms of our financial model, you talk about the depreciating the assets over the long term. Our long-term financial model includes that, but on our individual pro formas, it's not taken into account.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as your company grows, you have to take on more and more people to essentially run the landlord side of the business. I mean, that side of the company just keeps growing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Whereas you may do projects at the same rate, let's say 5 buildings a year are underway. And so you can have a stable size to the building division, but you have to have a constantly growing size to the landlord division.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got it. Yeah, we'll have to bring in more asset managers, investor relations, leasing team, etc. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's people in suits rather than steel toe boots.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. But I don't wear a suit too often, I must admit.
Well, I think that was a fantastic look at your company. And I'm going to say to the students, when Alfredo presented his one-pager, that's what we've been asking you to do. And you can see the importance of a one-pager. And he gave the whole thing of why this is what grabs someone's attention. You should be able to say something in approximately a form like that. And you do as that slide on your deck said, you do your who, what, where, when, why on that one-pager. It's an important piece of communication.
And typically they flip through it and go to the last page to look at the financials.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's in line with an investor's investment, philosophy, they can see that in a one-pager immediately. And then Lorne's right; they'll look at the numbers are what's really important. But if you're going to a bunch of investors and you're trying to find the ones that gravitate towards your type of investment, a succinct, brief, and thoughtful one-pager is really key and important.
And so do you write those in-house?
Yeah. Yeah.
But doesn't all the work go in before you write the one-pager?
Yeah, your research is substantial. You're looking at your market analysis. You're looking at your various opportunities. You're looking at pricing. You're looking at further market data. You're doing a ton of front-end research before you can actually put the words to paper for your one-pager. Absolutely. In some cases, we've launched many businesses. In some cases, it's taken us months to create a one-pager because it took a whole ton of actual market research to get us the information we needed to make sure that we were creating a business that actually served a need.
And what would your research team look like?
Various types. We have analysts, marketing team, financial accounting team, on-site, sort of ground, how do you get boots on the ground information, a team member, you'll need, you need your financial whizzes on the team. You'll need whoever, the visionaries, concepts on the team. So you need a good cross section of individuals.
Yeah.
And a wide range of skills, right?
Wide range of skills, absolutely. You can't be good at everything. And I surely don't profess to be, for sure. My role in my organization is to bring the vision and strategy, and then the rest of the team executes on it.
That was, we had one entrepreneur come on one year who said, an important part of things is knowing your weaknesses as well. Know what you can do well, but know what you really don't focus on as well, and bring in the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to have some knowledge in that space, be able to question and ask questions, and but absolutely, the professionals, you want to bring in the professionals that are familiar with a specific discipline when it comes to bringing the right team together. That's essentially what our business is about in terms of development. It's basically bringing strong teams together. You bring the design team, the engineering team, the finance team, the planning team. You bring your lawyers together, your accountants, and you just really have to orchestrate everybody to achieving a vision, achieving a goal, achieving an objective. And it's not easy, that's for sure.
Well, before you even have a project, you have, it sounds like, some significant soft costs.
Yeah, you're investing substantial dollars before you even have the site acquired, and so you're investing monies that you may not actually recover, because if the project doesn't make sense through your due diligence process, it's smarter to stop any efforts on it than moving forward, even if the project looks good from high level, but doesn't look good under the covers. Once you've dived into the numbers, it's better to move on and find a project or an endeavor that actually is profitable.
So what percentage of projects would you bail on? 20%? Like in a year, out of all the things you look at?
I would say, probably 50% of the projects that we look at, if not more, we bail on. It's quite, because we see a lot of opportunities, and if it doesn't fit our model well enough, it doesn't make sense for us to proceed. We had looked at, as an example, we looked at a project that looked like it fit our model, downtown Hamilton. It was going to be a 14-story 13-story mid-rise. We dove in, we spent several $100,000 on due diligence, and this looked like a really exciting project. Zoning was in line, but the biggest barrier that we had to face was heritage. And it was a building that you never would have thought had a heritage designation to it. And so for us, it was worth it for us to give up the project and move on to find another, even though it looked really good at the start, and even though we spent several $100,000 undertaking due diligence.
But that's an interesting number that you say you're at 50-50, ones you green light and go ahead with, and ones you put a stop to. I mean, in the architecture business, like in Europe, where most firms enter competitions to get projects, it's generally thought of, if you get 2 out of 10, you're doing reasonably well. But you're putting staff resources into 8 projects a year that you're not getting anything out of. That's just the way it is. That's the rate. And so
But that's like venture capital, right, Stephen? That's like venture capital, right? It's, your hit is 1 in 10 or 2 in 10.
Right. So, I mean, it's just an interesting discussion to have for students as well, to see what's your success rate on some research and doing something. And it's an important thing to understand also.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in your success in your career is really not what you actually choose to do, it's what you choose not to do. And so if you can avoid taking on things that will eventually waste a lot of your time, and you can do that early, you've saved yourself a lot of heartache, and you've saved yourself a lot of money. And so I'm a big believer in our organization that we're very critical on efforts and opportunities up front, and we do as much analysis as we can, and if it doesn't make sense, we move on, and we move on quickly.
That's an interesting perspective.
The other side of that is that when you believe in it, you believe in it.
Yeah, and then you go 150%. Absolutely.
Okay, we're running over now.
Yeah.
That was absolutely fantastic to have such a detailed look at a company and how you work and how you think. It was a really valuable discussion.
No, thank you. We are a bit behind. How would you want to handle this? I'm happy to keep continuing, because if we do take a break, we're going to be really behind. And the next couple sections aren't that long.
Oh, let's go. Right.
You guys are continuing to proceed. I'm okay with continuing to proceed. I got to put some kids to bed in a couple hours, or sorry, in the next hour. So
but let's go. Absolutely.
Let's go.
Okay, perfect. All right. Section 5, how architects can affect change in affordable housing. Exploring what developers and investors are looking for in affordable housing design. Oh. So what are affordable housing developers looking for in design? In terms of affordable, one of the governing aspects to the model making, for the model to work, and we've talked about this, you're probably getting the fact that the financials are really critical. And so practical yet creative design and unique designs is our approach that emphasize community and respect to the urban environment is really critical when it comes to getting your projects approved by the community. And so that's an important aspect. Affordable and energy efficient. Affordable being, trying to find ways to keep rents and costs low. If you can find cost savings in every aspect, even little ones, they all add up, and it all contributes to the overall cost, which then, if it's lower, can help contribute to the affordability of the project. Energy efficiency, what we try to achieve in our projects are a net zero electrical use. And so we do that by implementing such things as heat pumps, implementing, in some cases, if we can, solar, heat recovery systems, trying to mitigate the impact on the environment by the amount of energy that we use. We don't install air conditioning systems. Heat pumps are systems where it brings in fresh air from the exterior and heated or cooled. I think I talked about that earlier. But that's a more cost effective. That's a more energy efficient equipment. New materials to help provide insulating and insulation, meet insulation requirements to better control the waste of energy that is, or heat or cool air that's expelled through the building. In the common areas, we seek to create green spaces, private spaces, sustainable, a sustainable approach, natural cooling, playground spaces, bike storage, laundry, business center, party room. We look to create a community within these buildings. Really an important aspect of affordable design and just society in general. If we can improve the feeling of community in a building, you have tenants who look after the building more. You have care for their environment, and so that's really important to us, and that's considered during the design process. And then as well during the design process, constructability is really critical, because obviously you want to find more efficient ways to build the building. So what we often do is we work closely with our key trades and engineers and consultants and designers, as well as the operators, to ensure that the building is designed and built as efficiently as possible. Innovation through challenges. There is no doubt when you're undertaking a development project that it comes with many challenges. And so, if you can fit your design within the program requirements of zoning, small footprints and limited budget, you're able to make for a more successful project. Big demands that take place are high density, durability, sustainability, ability, and integration between all levels. Importance of creation of community spaces and green spaces, and working together with the city, universities, and developers. Really, it's really important and a great way to undertake and overcome challenges. Working together to create change. Cities and provinces, in our belief, need to upgrade their policies. We talked a little bit about some of the challenges with modular housing, or some of the tool that cities utilize to impact community development and design and construction, which are their zoning tools. Really critical. If they can relook at those to encourage the development of affordable housing, I think that would have a great impact on the housing crisis in general. Housing can only be planned by planners in conjunction with architects and landscape architects from the beginning of a site's acquisition for housing. Zoning for higher density, accommodate immigrants and students, and reduce environmental impacts. I made a comment about Hamilton in November undertaking a vote to expand the urban boundary. By doing that, there's some significant environmental impacts. There's a lot of land and a lot of available spaces within the urban environment that developers can utilize to develop housing. In most cities, most people live in multifamily and high-rise buildings, and I think that if you can if you can control the growth within the current environment with the current city limits, you're able to mitigate environmental impacts. So something that, especially with the growth of immigration and the increased number of students as a pandemic, sort of dissipates, we're going to see a lot more need for housing, and so finding more environmentally less impactful ways, I think, is a smarter approach. Cities need to invest and collaborate with universities, specific planning, architecture, and landscape architecture facilities, faculties rather, increase housing research on land management, building economics, and affordable, long-lasting housing typologies, educate city employees, planners, administration, inspectors on new technology and practices to increase efficiency and reduce costs. So that's what I was just talking about earlier about, giving the modular housing example. I think there's definitely ways that you can find that can help impact change. And so we're at the end of this section. It's a quicker section. Creating excellence. What low-cost design elements have the greatest impact, and in what ways do low budgets encourage creativity? So I'd like to pose that question to the group, and if you guys have any comments or questions, would love to hear them. We are getting to the end of a long presentation, so happy to continue on unless anybody has any more questions or thoughts. There's definitely a few more questions we can pose, but okay, let's move on. So we're at the last section, Q&A period. A few questions to pose for the group, and if we don't cover them all, we can just really have an open discussion. But yeah, and why don't we do that, Selena? Let's just I'll read through the questions and let's have a bit of an open discussion. I think that way, we can be cognizant of our time. So economic stability. So I'll just read through the questions. So how many people are living paycheck to paycheck? How does this affect our housing choices? What are the differences in creating housing for the homeless and affordable housing? Are we using the right benchmarks? How does Canada measure up against the rest of the world when it comes to affordable housing? Have you ever lived or traveled in a place where affordable housing was easily accessible? Is a median income as a measure of affordability the best measure? These are great questions for discussion. As you can see with the chart here, that where Canada lies, it lies, below most of the others. And so it's something that we could definitely, as a group and as a country and as a community, seek to improve. Oh. And last page of questions, your choices. What will you implement? What will you implement with these lessons from today in this course, in your job search, in your studies, in your choice of living situation? How do you think the pandemic has affected the way we think of our homes and our spaces, particularly seeing that remote and hybrid work environments are starting to increase and are likely not disappearing? And will it encourage more unique solutions? And so thank you everybody for listening today. I'm gonna just leave it open for discussion, but just cognizant of the time and don't want to take everybody too late.
I'll have to say my big takeaways are the methodologies that you presented, the ways you think about things, and that's been super valuable. And it's almost like the housing is a case study, but it could be a lot of subjects, a lot of possible initiatives. But that methodical way of thinking through something, that discussion we previously had about thinking through what's an opportunity and what's something you need to move on from, that was really an interesting thing.
Thank you.
I mean, for me, one of the big takeaways is just how clever you've been trying to figure out how to finance it. right? This is not an easy thing to finance any of these developments. And to get investors interested, you've got to have pretty unique hook today.
Absolutely.
There's from a design point of view, because I know you did invite some discussion about design and what architects can do and what creativity can bring to something. It's interesting to just point out one of the kinds of dilemmas that there is in design. So when you talk about efficiency of a building, one measure of efficiency might be, and Toronto Community Housing uses this, they say, what's the ratio of window to wall in the design of a facade? And there's kind of a joke in Toronto that you can always tell a TCH building because it has pretty small windows for the amount of wall. I forget what their ratio is. It's something like 30% or something around there. And they make the architects adhere to that number. If you go over that ratio, you're out. It just doesn't get built. And they go find another architect, which we've seen. So there is a thing where there's efficiency, but there's also what's a quality design. And they're not necessarily the same thing. They can be at odds with each other.
Yeah, it was on that comment when we were going through our design review panel on 405. Design review panels made up of various architects, engineers from the community, evaluating our design as it relates to the program requirements of the municipal guidelines. And you know, there's some great comments. Of course, architects are critiquing other architects. But there was one architect who had come up and said, you know, it's without a doubt, you know, commendable to try to balance the program requirements that are quite restrictive, given that you have, you know, budget constraints. And it was refreshing to hear that because it is a challenge. And, you know, we're trying to do our best to make this model work, being at 100% affordable, but it's a challenge. And it was nice to hear that was acknowledged through that process.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
There are no more questions or comments. Again, thank you very much for listening, everybody. It was really a pleasure to get a chance to see you all. And I thank you, Stephen and Lorne, again, for the opportunity. I'd love to do this again if you guys had the opportunity. And